So UFC 294, very wacky card, I'd say. I wouldn't say it was the best UFC pay-per-view of all time. Wouldn't say it was the worst. Interesting, I think, is the word that I would choose for it. And I know that's like a cliche term, but in reality, like there's just so many wild things that happened that we really couldn't have predicted. And to start off with the main event, I mean, you have Islam Makhachev defending his title once again against Alexander Volkanovski. And this one was not at all the same to the first fight because it ended so quickly. Islam Makhachev head kick KO over Volk. And now he's up 2-0 on that little series. And I think that Volk at 155, that conversation is put to rest for now. At least as long as Islam's champion. But I think that this was really like his marquee win because Volk, he got that win last time, but people still debated kind of like, well, depending on how you scored those rounds, damage versus control, who really won that fight. I still thought it was Islam, but I get it being by a slim margin. Left no doubt in this one. Proved that his kickboxing is phenomenal by having such a technical, like, sort of knockout against Volkanovski. I put this in the notes too. Like the way he fought almost reminded me of like a Surreal Gone fight because he attacked from the legs to the body to set up the head kick, and that's just incredible high level stuff.
He hit him with a nice little feint, and then the head kick just came out of nowhere.
I love the work too before that in the tie clinch. I thought that was really smart, just to hold his head like that. And
dude.
I
mean, if you can get Alexander Volkanovski of all people with that, then like, there's no way anybody could have predicted that's how that fight was gonna go.
And he hasn't been finished, I think, since his fourth pro fight, which was that welterweight one that he lost ages ago. So quite an achievement for Islam Makhachev to defeat Volk. And we'll get into Volk a little bit in a second, but I think you got to give Islam his flowers because that was just a systematic beatdown, and it did not take very long. And I don't think you can really use the short notice excuse for this. Maybe if it was like a decision and Volk got tired, that's one thing, but this was cut and dry. He knocked him out in the first round. I think even with a full camp, that probably still would have gone down similarly. And even like the finish itself, the composure that he shows. I don't know if you caught this when he was finishing with the ground and pound, how he pinned his head up with his knee. That was incredible.
It was a pretty like grueling shot of Volk's face.
Yeah.
Like his eyes are closed and everything. He's just like taking it.
It's just crazy to see something like that, especially happen to a high level guy like Volk. And me and you talk about pound for pound number one. You almost have to consider Islam Makhachev for that now. I mean, we say Volk is number one. This guy beat him twice. Can you really argue it? You have John Jones obviously still at heavyweight, and they were exchanging some words throughout the week.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Do you think that Islam has cemented a top spot in the pound for pound race just yet, or do you think top two, top three?
I mean, dude, for what it's worth, it's like, this is I don't even want to sound like a casual or what per se when I say this, but like this might be the closest like we've gotten and maybe will get to Khabib, and I think like even then this might be a more like complete version of Khabib in a way. I mean, dude, like it is because for the whole pound for pound talk and whatnot, I mean. Obviously, John Jones, for him to still be around holding the title as a heavyweight now, like, I think I get where Islam's coming from, but he just hasn't, his career hasn't, I guess, just been long enough, I guess, if you want to say.
Even his title reign, I guess you could say.
Especially
even the
his
people he
title
beat
reign,
before the title, because that was the big gripe about him, that he got his title shot prematurely after beating Thiago Moises and Bobby Green, Dan Hooker.
Yeah.
Like, people were talking about the quality of competition, but I think after this fight especially, people got to shut up when it comes to Islam. All the haters got to stop. This dude is for real. I like the Khabib comparison, and I do think that there is a chance that Islam could usurp him. I mean, his kickboxing, Khabib's kickboxing was never as good as that. And maybe you could argue that Khabib's like wrestling overall might be a little better, but who knows what we're going to see over time. I mean, Islam is right in the midst of his prime, and there's so many options for him going forward. I mean, at lightweight, there's still Gamrot, Charles Oliveira, and Colby Covington. If he wins in December to get the welterweight title, there's a chance Islam moves up, while the lightweight division maybe gets a little more clarity in that top five, because me and you talk all the time about the top five at lightweight. It's like they only fight each other. Like Chandler, Poirier, Gaethje, they're not fighting guys that are really too far below them. Gaethje kind of has, so I'll give him credit for that. But
I don't know, dude. I saw Michael Chandler. He was definitely, like typically Mike Chandler is. He's not afraid to just express how he feels to everyone in a very, detailed way, and he doesn't see it with Islam, obviously.
That's why I didn't fight him when they originally were supposed to fight, because he doesn't see it.
And now, I don't know how he gets to that fight with Islam Makhachev, because there's so much out there already for Islam Makhachev, and it's like all of that. I guess. I don't know. I guess we'll see after the Conor McGregor fight, but
I mean, that fight either needs to be booked or he needs to move on as fast as possible. And
that's how I felt at first. Now we're here, and it's like,
and you never know what's going to come. I mean, right now we're recording this on Sunday night. The UFC was saying that Monday, Tuesday there might be some announcements, like big announcements, and who knows, maybe one of those is McGregor versus Chandler, now that we know Conor's back in the testing pool, at least for now, with that whole situation. But at the same time, I think if this isn't the McGregor fight materializing, like these announcements that they're talking about, I think Chandler should just move on at this point. Like, I know he said he had a tentative date in his head. I don't know when that is, but you mentioned it. There's so much going on at lightweight. He needs to move.
The key word there is tentative. So it's like, how much more is this going to get dragged out?
I think that we are getting closer to a resolution. I mean, all this time we've been talking about it. We've talked about how there's really no clarity whatsoever. But now I think with McGregor's USADA status kind of more cut and dry, we know what that is. We know what the timetable is. I think we're going to find out one way or another, hopefully by the end of 2023. I think we will. But I just think that Chandler needs to make some sort of decision. He can't just keep waiting and waiting, because the division's going to keep passing him by. And there's no momentum for an Islam fight right now, so he can't even really be talking like that. It sucks, because he's such a good fighter. Like, that's a fight I'd love to see, honestly, because the wrestling, I think, would be pretty even, and Chandler's got so much power on the feet. You never know what's going to happen, but we'll see. And let's talk a little bit about Volk, I think, before we move on. I was thinking about this a lot before we got started, because I put that I think that Volk should take a little bit of time off, even though he doesn't want to do that. But the more I listen to that interview that he had after the fights and talking about how he was struggling mentally a lot and really needed this fight to kind of just have something to keep him going, that's not something you really want to hear. And I know Volkanovski is one of the best fighters in the world, may still be the best in some people's opinions. It's just we've talked about this in the past with guys who are struggling to retire near the end of their career. It's similar things that they're saying. They don't have much purpose outside of their careers. And to hear Volk say that in his prime, I don't know, that worried me a little bit. And I don't want to say I want to see him take a long time off, but that sounded like somebody who mentally might not be doing the greatest. And I don't know if hopping right back in there is the best possible thing for him to do. I get what he's saying is activity is going to lead me to not overthink anything, but that's just a band-aid. So if there's a bigger problem there, I feel like that's something that he should address while he still has his wits about him, because if he has the awareness to know that that's how he's feeling, if this is something, mental health is a serious thing, and I know some people still think of it as taboo, but this is MMA, man. I don't want to see people getting into the octagon because they feel like they need to mentally. I don't, and especially a guy like Volk. I mean, he has a whole family, and you wonder why, as an athlete, what makes him feel that way. when he's not competing. Like, it sucks. You want to see a guy like that who's as good as he is be in tip-top shape mentally and physically. But I don't know. What do you think should be next for Volk? Even if it's like a ways away from now. Like, how does the division move forward? Because before you do start, though, like, obviously the UFC had tentatively talked about Volk versus Elliott in January at 145. So what do you think of the status of that fight?
I think that fight would probably have to, because if it doesn't happen sooner rather than later, then you're talking about an interim title fight happening, and so obviously Topuria would have to win that fight to have a shot at Volk, and so it all boils down to uh, Volkanovski himself and where like what he feels, and I mean he's the champ at the end of the day, so like he's pretty much calling the shots, but he's also just pretty much left it to UFC to just keep putting him in fights that make sense and that he's obviously can fare well in. This one obviously once again I don't think anybody saw this coming, but obviously he looked completely outmatched in this one, and so I think definitely like UFC's gotta protect their guy, and we as fans too, like we want to see the most competitive fight possible. So, like obviously
Right.
the knockouts are awesome and stuff. Like don't get it wrong, but like especially when you're taking not even like the greatest featherweight of all time now, and we're talking about like is he losing it? Is he losing like not even his edge, but just like it's just outside things obviously that trickled down to him being in the octagon. So
Yeah, and I think you just, at the end of the day, like on a human level, you just gotta hope that he's all right. Like I hope I'm not like overthinking it, but I think that mental health is like something that's really serious, and people don't think about
well, yeah,
athletes in that
especially
way.
when you're the absolute pitbull that Alexander Volkanovski is, and you're getting
Yeah, it shows you
knocked
that
around.
anyone can really deal with
Yeah,
those types of things. And like I know a lot of people think of athletes as like always mentally strong, but I think even they struggle a lot. And for Volk to open up about that a little bit, I thought that was brave of him to say the least. And you hope, like I said, you hope that he's all right because, like you said, you want to see the most competitive version of a fighter, and you want to see him doing well mentally. And honestly, speaking of that, I think it kind of naturally brings us to the co-main event because Kamaru Usman was talking about his confidence kind of being a little shaken leading into this fight versus Khamzat Chimaev, and Khamzat beat Usman by majority decision, 229-27s and then 28-28. Uh, I think the 29-27s are right. I don't know how they got to 28-28. I personally don't think Usman got 2 rounds in that, no matter how you slice it. Um, there were moments for him in different rounds, but I think Hamzat took the first two, and Usman arguably could have taken the third.
yeah.
So I will say this to start. No one has ever done that to Kamaru Usman. I mean, we're talking about a guy who, before this fight, had only officially been taken down 1 time in his whole pro career, and then he got taken down 4 times in this fight. So that says something about Hamzat's grappling ability. But the fact that he just was taking him down with ease on some of those attempts was
Yeah.
crazy in itself, and the grounded pound was nice. I thought Usman defended like the submissions well. I think that's kind of why he didn't get finished in the first round because that first round was a 10-8. Like that was clear for Hamzat. But I think that Hamzat's cardio is still kind of a question just because this is a second fight now against the top guy, like we saw in the Gilbert Burns fight. Hamzat kind of fades after the first round. And my first question to you is, do you think that this is an actual issue, or do you think kind of what I think, and it's kind of like a fight IQ thing, and it can be improved if he doesn't kind of like blow all of his energy in the first round trying to finish a fight?
Uh, yeah. I mean, yeah. I'd say like, for what the performances that he's given, obviously, like I think that's fair to say. It's a fight IQ thing, especially when, obviously you look at a guy like Marab, and for as many takedowns as he's attempting in his fights, like he's not breaking a sweat. But like with, especially when you're fighting a Kamaru Usman, like you take Kamaru Usman down 4 times, like that's gonna take quite a bit of energy. So, I think for this fight, like definitely, made sense, and that I think going forward, like, yeah, it's fixable. I think, but maybe I don't know. It's like for like with Hamza, I think he's just because we're talking about, if we're gonna line up with where Usman's confidence is at and Hamza, like Hamza, I've always felt like, no matter what, like even if he was gonna get tired, like he was gonna hang in there and he wasn't gonna get finished, and like it took, obviously not the most as decisive as you want, obviously, but he got it done regardless. And I know for him, obviously, he's, if we're gonna talk about especially this fight being at 185, like he's the one with like the real title aspiration here. And
Well,
so,
Usman, he mentioned after the fight, and I kind of wanted to get to this after Chimaev, but you kind of like naturally have helped us segue into it. Usman does want to stay at 185. He wants DDP, which I actually think was an interesting call out. I like that fight a lot. The more I think about it.
yeah, and I don't. The thing is with if DDP, if like DDP is really I don't, because I don't know, maybe like I don't know how it would work, because maybe DDP is literally the next challenger for Sean Strickland, and so
See, like, I'm curious to like what you think of this because I don't think so, and I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it, but we were talking before we started recording. I mentioned Cannonier as one candidate coming off a win, and let me see like who exactly like he's beaten in his past few fights because I don't want to get it wrong, but he's already beaten Sean Strickland, the champion. He's coming off the split decision against Strickland and then that unanimous decision against Vettori. And now he's fighting Dolidze in December. I forgot about that. So, I don't know, man. I think if he wins that fight, you could make the argument that he deserves a title shot because, people were saying that this was a title eliminator coming in. Chimaev broke his hand in this fight. That's something to note. So, if that's going to become an issue, he might not be able to fight Sean Strickland on relatively shorter notice. So that might move things along at middleweight. Could get DDP a title shot. You never know. But at the same time, I think that Sean Strickland has a point saying that Hamzat may need one more fight just because Usman's great, but at the end of the day, that was a 170 pounder.
yeah,
And
a 170 pounder, on short notice.
right. And coming off a couple losses, as great as Usman is, like this is no disrespect, and it's not to even take away from Chimaev because, like I said, no one has ever done anything like that to Kamaru Usman. But me personally, I would love to see Chimaev versus Costa get rebooked at some point, whether that be soon or in a few months because of Hamzat's injury. That's the fight that I want to see. I've been wanting to see it. It feels like it's been brewing forever. I mean, Costa fought a dude in the stands. I don't know if you caught that. But so we know he's ready, despite the staph infection. I mean, we got the secret juice sheathed until I think Paulo gets in there. But I think we learned a lot about Hamzat in this one. It wasn't as much of a war as the Gilbert Burns one. It wasn't as chaotic. So I think we got to see what a composed Hamzat looks like over the course of a few rounds. And I think this was a good view, good test for him. And I think if he does fight Strickland next, I don't believe that that's as one-sided as some people are saying it is because Strickland's got crazy cardio, man. He doesn't back down to guys who are trying to take the center of the octagon. His footwork is just as phenomenal as Hamzat's. So I feel like that would just be like, just two guys just going right at each other, and you really got to wonder whose will is stronger because if that fight gets into the championship rounds, I have a hard time picking against Strickland. But if that fight were to end early, Chimaev, I think, has a good chance of being the guy who wins it. So who knows what's going to happen at 185. I don't think that we got as much clarity out of this fight as we would have hoped. But at the end of the day, we're still moving forward. And one fight that really we got nothing out of was Ankalaev versus Walker. No contest after Magomed Ankalaev kneed Johnny Walker on the ground illegally. Very blatant. It was by accident though. That's very important, I think, because it was definitely not on purpose. He was trying to knee him in the body, and it just missed completely. And that's why it was a no contest and not a DQ for people who don't understand that, and for people who think it was rigged. I saw a lot of comments about that. I don't know about you. I don't think that this was rigged. I think this was just total incompetence by Abu Dhabi's medical staff. Because let's talk about the elephant in the room here. So this fight ended because the doctor came into the cage, was doing one of those like quick on the fly concussion tests for Johnny Walker, and he asked him where they were or what country they're in. That's the big thing. What country are we in? And Johnny Walker apparently said in the desert. Now, a lot of people are mad because they're saying that this might have been a very premature stoppage because he did look a little hazy, but can you really fault the guy for not knowing the United Arab Emirates? Because you got to think about, like, when people are talking about that region, they talk about Dubai or they talk about Abu Dhabi. They never really mention the country's name. And like me and you know that it's the UAE. But you have to also think from Johnny Walker's perspective, he's in the middle of a fight. He just got kneed illegally. I still think he was there enough to fight. But I do think they should have given him some time, which that's the other thing I don't understand, why they didn't give him the full 5 minutes before doing that test. But either way, they're asking him this stuff in English, I think. And he's like Brazilian, so he speaks Portuguese, and English is like his second language. You got to wonder if there's any like translation problems there too. I just think that was handled horribly by the commission. Like, whether you think that he was fit to continue or not, I think that was handled so badly. They didn't give him the amount of time that he should have had. Don't understand why that didn't happen. And at the end of the day, both fighters really are victims in this one because I don't think either of them probably get their win money unless they get like a backdoor deal. But it just sucks because Ankalaev could have been on his way to a win, and the way that Johnny Walker fights, he's always one shot away from victory. So really unfortunate. I don't know if you have anything to add to the chaos. I wish there was more to take away from the fight itself, but I guess I'm really more asking for your take on what happened medically in that fight. Which is crazy to think about.
Dude, well, I mean, like, if not even the doctors know, then, like, I definitely, like, got nothing. Because, like, that kind of seemed like this was, like, their first time, like, ever, like, seeing something like this, like you said, like, on the fly, it's almost like they even just thought of the question on the fly, like, what country are we in?
And, like, even in the desert, like, I get that he didn't answer the question the way it should have been answered, but, like, there's so many different things he could have said that were worse than that. Like, the Middle East, there's a lot of deserts. Like, that's not, like, a crazy answer. Like,
and then afterwards, it's like, oh, they're going to fight anyways.
It's like, what is going on?
And then it's like, now you have that, and that could have turned into a whole thing on its own.
Could have been so much worse than that turned out. Like, Dana getting in there and the security separating them as quickly as they did, they deserve a lot of credit for that because we've seen brawls in the cages. Like, I remember, this is like real old school. I don't remember if it was Strikeforce or Elite XC. I think it was Strikeforce. But Nick Diaz and Jake Shields fighting in the octagon against, like, everybody. And that was like a huge brawl in the cage. You know, obviously remember Conor versus Khabib, that whole fallout. And we even saw it recently in Bellator with Johnny Eblen and Leon Edwards after Eblen beat his brother. Mm-hmm. So I thought that the security team handled this one well, but what a disaster just all around. And one of the contributing factors of why this card was so just wacky and really just not one of the better ones. And I don't think it was really as good as it was hyped up to be.
Yeah, dude. With Ankalaev, especially here in this case, I mean, like, you know, in some way, he's really fallen, like, victim to all this light heavyweight, just, like, you know, misfortune. Like, because this right here could have really, like, set, like, a fight, you know, the win over obviously, guy like Johnny Walker's on the surge that he's been on, and obviously with as much experience as he has, like, this could have been a huge win for Ankalaev going forward and put him back
Number
on the right
two
track.
ranked.
Yeah,
Like he's right there. And his last fight, we were talking before we came on here, was the title fight versus Jan, where it was a draw.
yeah,
So he technically hasn't won a fight since July of 2022.
yeah.
And he's had the draw and now a no contest. You're right, man. It really is just terrible luck.
Mm-hmm.
But you just gotta hope he can move forward from it. I hope both guys can get back in there soon enough and just move past this, because this fight was one of those ones you really like to forget in the end of it.
Yeah.
So, rest of the main card was pretty fun, I would say. There were a couple of first round finishes. Ikram Aliskerov with that barrage against Warley Alves with the knee, and then that big just flurry of punches at the end there. And then Saeed Nurmagomedov with that guillotine, man, and just cinched it on so quick. What an elite finish, especially from a guy, even despite that last name, Nurmagomedov, he's more of a kickboxer in there who has good jiu-jitsu, and he showed that jiu-jitsu in that fight, man. So props to him. But one guy I really wanted to talk about on the prelims, which weren't really that good in general, honestly. I didn't like the prelims on this card. Not a lot of good fights, good outcomes, but at least we got something with Muhammad Mokaev versus Tim Elliott. I thought this one was a perfect matchup because it's a good test for Mokaev, because Tim Elliott has such an awkward style in there with all the stance switching and the hopping and just takedowns. You never know when they're coming. He has a great ground game, jiu-jitsu and wrestling. So I thought it was giving Mokaev some problems early in the fight, and I did honestly think that Mokaev might be in some trouble in those first few minutes. But then, as great fighters do, man, he just recovered, and even in that first round, he flipped the script, and then the rest of the fight, it just seemed like it was all Mokaev's way, and that arm triangle was phenomenal by him, especially, like I said, against a guy like Tim Elliott, whose ground game is not to be slept on. So Mokaev has now really propelled himself into the rankings. He beat a veteran, really good veteran, who's still winning fights at the highest level here in the UFC. So, and then he called out Kai Kara France. What do you think of that, man? I think that that's a pretty good fight. But
Yeah, dude. I think he's definitely earned that kind of call out. I think Carcar France is, he's definitely not scoffing at it, but we'll see. I think it makes sense, and yeah, it would be an absolute electric fight. So hopefully,
I think Mokaev's probably going to be 9th or 10th come Tuesday, because he's 11th now, and Tim Elliott was number 10. Kai Kara France is number 5. Makes enough sense. I know Manel Cape also called Kai Kara France out recently, so you wonder if anything's going to come of that. But flyweight, man, there's a lot of good fighters. It's a really deep division. It feels like, remember when we used to talk about bantamweight a couple of years ago, where it felt like 1 to 15, anybody has potential to be champion? With flyweight, it really feels that way. I mean, at least for the top 10 to 11, I would say. It feels like on any given night that any of those guys could really pull it off. And obviously next month we have Pantoja fighting, he's fighting Brandon Royval at Madison Square Garden in the co-main at UFC 295. So we're looking forward to that. But before we get to that, next week there's no UFC, but there's still a fight. Francis Ngannou versus Tyson Fury is finally going down. I'm so excited for this fight. It feels like we kind of know what's going to happen, because, you have the best heavyweight boxer in the world versus, granted, it's the best heavyweight mixed martial artist, arguably, him and John Jones, neck and neck, I would say. But as a boxer, Francis Ngannou's completely unproven. We know about that crazy one-shot knockout power. I'm still leaning Tyson Fury. I think that just the technique that he has and the way that he picks guys apart in there, I think that's going to really do him a big favor versus Ngannou. But what do you think of this fight coming in before we go here?
I mean, yeah, very similar. I think, it just, because that's the thing. It's Fury's not. I don't think Fury's gonna allow himself to even. I think it's more he's not gonna allow himself to get hit than just completely pick Francis Ngannou apart. And so like with that, he's just gonna wherever whatever Francis is gonna leave open, like he's just gonna work like, and then eventually, I mean, like yeah, like Francis might like not even like realize or think that it's gonna catch up to him, but like over the course of the entire fight, like it will catch up if it does happen. So
I mean,
um,
you ever heard the phrase like "be careful what you wish for, you might just get it." That's what happened with Francis Ngannou. I mean, he's fighting the best boxer in the world, so
yeah,
he's gonna
man.
find out one way or another whether he's ready for it and he actually rises to the occasion and pulls this crazy upset off, or if I guess the more likely outcome happens that Tyson Fury wins this fight, whether it be by knockout or decision. I think that the better boxer is probably going to be the person who wins this fight. I don't know if Francis Ngannou can land that big shot, but we know it only takes one, and that's I think the big excitement behind this fight. So next week we'll be back talking about that and any other news that may pop up in the meantime. So see you all then.
Yes. Hey, long